Okay, this is another one of those videos where I take a look at some Temu products, and I'm going to be giving away some rods and reels to some kids, and I thought I'd give this a look and just to see what it would be. Before I get into anything, and before people claim that I'm a communist or whatever, the first thing I would say is if you're a beginning fly fisherman, I tend to aim these more towards intermediates, but if you're an absolute beginner fly fisherman, I would personally suggest going to a fly shop and talking to some of the guys there, or the women there too, and actually try out some rods and have them set you up with kind of a beginner type of rod. What I'm doing is I typically, I can cast most anything at this point in my life, but I'm looking at some of this stuff that comes directly from China versus through a whole bunch of intermediaries which tack on their 100% uptake each time. So I bought a Temu rod, a reel from Temu. It's not really from Temu. It's it's a company that probably sells to a dozen other companies. A reel. The rod was, I think it was under $20. The reel was around that same price. It's actually a pretty nice reel. I got some line. I think the line was about $10, $9-10. So anyways, for about $50 you can get set up here. And I have some leader and some backing that I've had in the past. So I'm going to set this up and see what we can do. So the first thing is I guess we'll put the rod aside for now, and I'm going to test this rod against my Orvis Recon rod, which is the rod I use 90% of the time. What you're going to need for this is some backing, some fly line, something to cut everything with, a pen, and I tend to like the Michigan Trout Unlimited fly fishing school pen. That's the pen I tend to use, and I'm going to also be using a book. I'm choosing the Michigan Trout Streams books by Bob Linsman. It's a great old book, and I've tried to fish in almost every one of those spots. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out a reel, and most reels there is a spot on the reel somehow to remove the actual reel from it. Okay. Now before I get too far into this, reels sit with the reel holder facing up, and typically it's on the left side, so you would crank in this direction. Okay. So you're pulling the line in this way up through the back. All right. That's a typical left-handed American way, 95%. I fish with the reel on the right-hand side, and there's a way to switch these all around, but I'm going to set this up as like a normal person would. Okay. So it has to go, the line has to go in this direction. Okay. So I'm going to take this off so I don't get confused. So I'm taking it off the reel, okay? Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach what's called backing. And backing is just this sort of I think it's Dacron. And this just happens to be white. You can get these in all kinds of cool colors. And I'm going to put some of it on there. Now, I'm going to tip this down so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is, remember, we're reeling this way, okay? So the line has to come in off the bottom. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the line, and all these knots, you can look them up, but I'm just going to show you. Oh, that's not the way to do it. I'm going to show you how I do it, and it's hard to do this when you're trying to do this for a camera. But I wrap this around it twice, and then you just tie a knot like you would any other knot. You know, just a regular old, yeah, I can do this. just a regular old granny knot. Okay, I'm trying to do this backwards away from me, so. And then all you do is on the end of this, just tie another knot. And this knot is called an arbor knot. So this little knot sits there. If you want to, you can run it through again. We'll just skip that part. I'm going to trim this end piece off, the tag end. These are terms you learn to use, okay? And then, okay, let's see if I can get this right now. I've already screwed it up, so. Okay, so I have my little knot in the end, and then I tie a regular knot around it. Let's do this right. Again, if I were doing this knot on the camera, it'd be so much simpler. Okay, there, I'll do it my way. Okay, you tie that around, then that does that, and then that just kind of locks in. So you can start this up like this. Okay, now this is where the book and the pen come in handy. The pen, I'm going to use my table here. I'm going to just stick it in like that. Look at that. How's that for technical? And then you need tension. And that's what the book is for. And the book, you just set it through the book. Now I have my tension. And I'm going to put my rod on my reel. There we go. And now I just, reel it in. Sometimes it needs a little help in the beginning. You need to reel in a few. Once you get it started, it'll come on. Pretty cool system, huh? And you put on a whole bunch of this stuff. Now, this is going to be for Michigan streams, so it's rarely, if I were bone fishing, I would put many, many yards of this on here. But we're just going to coat the back of this with some of this. And it won't take us long to get very far. But you don't need any fancy equipment to do this. The book works really quite well as a tensioning device. In the old days, the backing was primarily used for, they would have shorter fly lines, and because they weren't wide arbor reels, the backing just increased the arbor size. So I got plenty of backing on there right now. It's just I would say a 1/4 inch deep. If I were obsessive compulsive, there would be there's ways of doing this to where you get exactly the right amount. Again, this is kind of a beginner setup, so I'm not too worried about it. So I'll trim this. If I had better clippers, it would be even better. There we go. Okay, so now I have to tie the fly line on, and the fly line I've already marked. It's a 5-weight. It's a 5-weight line, and there's always a tag on it. Take this off. And there's always a tag on it that says this end towards the reel. And you may have noticed too that I have a black line, a long black line, which indicates that this is a 5-weight line. Now, first thing I'm going to do is take this off. Okay, I better remember that side now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this to this. Look at that. And here's my line. And I'm going to see, it's coming off this side, I believe. Sometimes I just throw the line on the ground and it works out pretty well. But I'm going to disconnect this. There we go. And now we have to tie these two together. And we can use an Albright knot for that. So an Albright knot is, you can use any kind of knot to do this. A surgeon's loop would probably work too, but we're going to just tie an Albright knot, which means that you loop this over like this, the fly line over like that. You take this and you bring it around. Actually, you should do it like, yeah, you do it this way. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna have to do some editing, I think. Okay. You wrap this around 1,000,000 times. Usually about 10. Then you bring this through. Bring this one through the hole, and you have that one through the hole. And you just pull, and it should tighten up. Sometimes you have to pull it a bit. There we go. And that is probably about the worst Albright knot I've ever tied. But you know what? It's not going anywhere. So I'm not too worried about it. So I'm going to trim this off. There we go. Pull this a little bit tighter. There we go. And that's on there. That's not going anywhere. Then we take this, trim this off. There we go. We're on there. So now we're going to finish reeling this on. Let's see if we need the... Okay. And here we're already starting to get a big knot here. So we have a problem. We have a problem already. And I'll bring you back when I get this on. And we're finishing up here. There was some magic that happened in that break, but we'll be okay. So now this particular line doesn't have a loop. Often you'll have a loop on the end. And let's pull out a leader. Let's see if I screw this one up too. Okay, I can't get the top off this leader here. Okay, let's get the thing open. And we'll pull out a leader. And this leader, if I do this correctly, hopefully this leader will just fall apart. I'm taking off the thick part first, and then I look at it and it looks like it'll just peel off, and there it goes. Okay, so the first thing I do is I have my line and my leader, and we have a tool here called a nail nut tool. Okay, and we'll put this in the nail nut tool, and I take quite a bit of this end of this leader. I put it on here, put my thumb on there, stick this around, then wrap up 7 times up through there. I'll do that one more time. Run this through the center hoop. See if I can do this. There we go. There we go. Run that through there. Take the end of my fly line, stick it in there, hold that also, and then with a quick tug, you pull that off, bring it down towards the end, and then start tightening up. That was again pretty sloppy. Again, I'm doing this for the camera, which if I cared enough, I would. There we go. And we tug on this enough times, get our hemostats out. Use those to help pull. There we go. And there's our nail nut. These are nippers. Trim that off. And our nail nuts on there. Then we can tuck that line back in, and we're ready to go. There, so there's our reel is all set up. Our Temu reel and our Temu line. And now I'll pull out the Temu rod. I haven't pulled it out yet, so this will be interesting. I'll turn it around. It's a Sugayilang. Okay, one of the top brands, I think. It has this little plastic thing here, which I'm not sure what that's for, but I'm going to leave it there. We have a nice, it's kind of a metal, inexpensive metal reel seat. A decent enough cork. And if I'll do the whole thing here. Let's see if I got something to cut that cork with. This might work. And my first fly rod I bought, I didn't know you're supposed to take this stuff off, which becomes one of the hardest things ever to do. There we go. And the cork is not bad at all. It's got the formed cork on the end, the little pieces that are all glued together, and then regular cork in the center, and it's been filled quite nicely. It's got a nice feel for it. I would do that. It's got a hook holder. It is a Sugayilang Dempsey 9-foot 5/6 weight. Okay, so right away that tells me it's a little bit stiffer rod because it's saying it's a 6 weight. Let's take a look at the rest of it. Right away I can tell it's a much thicker rod than if you were to buy an Orvis or a Winston or something like that. But it'll do the job. It has the dots to line up everything. And I'm going to put it together, put the reel on. Let's go ahead and put the reel on right now just so you can see how that goes on. Again, if you're a beginner, it's got kind of a fake double ring there. There's this thing here. Okay, that's interesting. Oh no, it doesn't have a fake double ring. It's actually a real double ring. So that's good. And then there's usually a groove here that tucks into there. It's nice, lots of space. That slides in there. The reel seat slides in. And then this is the locking mechanism right there. That's a pretty handsome little rod. And we're going to test it for casting. So here I am outside, and I've got my brand new Temu rod and my Orvis Recon rod that I use all the time. And just a quick comparison, they're both 9.5 foot. They're both 9-foot rods, 9.5-foot rods, and they both have about 10 guides. The guides are pretty close to the same position. Cork-wise, maybe you can see up close. I'm just going to show the two of them. This is my Temu rod, the green one, and this one is my Orvis rod with a cheap reel on it. My Orvis reel, or my Orvis rod, has a much thinner handle. This is a huge handle, which may or may not be good. I think if I were to fish with this more, I'd probably sand this down some. It's a little bit different shape too than my Orvis one. Fit and finish though of all the pieces are actually pretty good. It seems, I mean, obviously my Orvis rod has a nice wooden reel seat and everything. This one is just a metal one, and it's bare bones, but it works pretty well. It's got all of the basic, functions of a rod. The first things I see when I take a look at this is that the Temu rod, what is it called? Sujalang Dempsey rod. We'll call this the Suji rod. Um, is much heavier than my Orvis rod. My Orvis rod, I don't know what it weighs. I think 2.5 ounces or something. 2 and 5/8 ounces. This one doesn't have a weight on it. I probably should have weighed it, but it's definitely a heavier rod. Does it say? No. It's also much thicker. And I'm guessing it's just an older technology kind of rod. This is, this rod's about 10 years old, my Orvis rod, whereas, this one's new one. I think this is about maybe 20-year-old technology. I have a lot of student rods that I bought about 20 years ago, and they're sort of this thickness. So there is that difference. They both have hook keepers. The Suji rod has the Temu rod has a kind of a square keeper. It also, you can see that the handle, it's kind of this broken up cork versus thin cork, so it's got that on either end, which actually may not be a bad thing. I don't know. So let's cast them and see. Okay, so I'm gonna set down. Well, I don't even have to set down. I'll just do this. So casting the Sujaling rod, it's a much, much slower rod. I'm guessing it's a mid-flex rod, and we'll check that in just a second. Very heavy, or not, I shouldn't say it's very heavy. The balance point is right about here, right about at the hook keeper, as far as this reel and everything. And probably if I were to cast with it for any length of time, I'd have to choke on it way up here. I typically am comfortable holding it right near the reel, but I think with this rod, I would have to, hold my hand closer up to the end here. And then now it's starting to feel okay. It doesn't feel quite as heavy this way. It's real top heavy. And this handle is quite large. But other than that, it's tracking well. It's tracking perfectly well. Let me cast my normal Orvis rod just to get a feel for the difference. Oh yeah, this is like casting a feather compared to this other one. My Orvis reel is like it's a dream to cast. But I love this. I mean my Orvis rod. This is a dream to cast. And again, I like to hold it way back at the end, so that's just my personal preference. But again, both of them are about the same size. So I'm going to put my Orvis rod down and focus on this Suji rod again. And we'll cast it a few more times. Now let's take a look at the action on this thing and just see what exactly we have. And judging by the bend of it, I can see that it's primarily bending down to about here. So I would call this a mid-flex rod. My Orvis rod is more of a tip flex rod. This rod would be okay for a fairly new fly caster, because these slower rods tend to give you a little bit more, they're a little more forgiving. It is thicker, it is heavier, and again, I always say go to a fly shop, try out a bunch of rods with a good salesman, and ask the salesman why is like if they say, oh, this is the rod that works for you, ask them why that works for you. Uh, and they should be able to explain, well, it matches your casting style and this and that. So it should match you, not some expert opinions from somewhere else. People that fish a lot have different expectations than somebody that's fairly new. Um, I would certainly keep this rod in my car or boat or something as my spare rod. Probably not the rod I would fish with all the time, um, but definitely not. There's nothing wrong with it. A couple things I noticed that kind of bother me a little bit, and these are kind of really dumb things, is that the pieces start quite large where they're connected, then they get thin where they insert into the next piece, and then it's fairly large again. See, this is where it gets so it's not like it's not smooth. It's not a smooth transition, but that's like, that has nothing to do with casting. They do have them all reinforced really nicely, which is really good. See where the ferrules are. I'll pull it apart. Where the ferrules are, this is the place where it's going to break, and they have these reinforced. So that's a nice touch on a cheap rod like this. And again, this rod was, I want to say $18. I mean, you can't get any cheaper than that. This handle, I think I would definitely, I don't have the biggest hands in the world, so I like a little bit thinner cork here. And I think if I were to use this, I would just take some sandpaper and just sand it down, and get it a little thinner. As far as casting, and distance and all that kind of stuff, uh, again, I'm using probably the cheapest line you can find, and it's just casting like butter. Okay, it's not an issue at all casting. I mean, I'm not going to get an 80 or 90 yard cast with this at all, but uh, or 100-foot cast. But it's definitely fine for 90% of fishing, I think. It's pretty good. Pretty good. The reel itself is a pretty standard reel that you see. It looks like it's cast or machined anyway, like CNC kind of. It has fairly decent drag. They don't hold up real long. I have a number of these that, especially for my student rods, I use these. And uh, if they get abused a lot, like put in the sand and stuff, they don't hold up real well. But I also have other ones that I've used forever, and they're perfectly adequate for what you're doing. For just basic trout and bass and panfish kind of things, and they look okay. That's a nice. I think you can get them in all different colors. This one I just got the green one because I thought it would look cool. I don't have a green one, but they come in red and silver and black and a bunch of different colors. Um, Pretty nice design, not overly heavy. The drag is over here, which is nice. They easily come off. It's got like just your standard little switch here. Let me see if I can pull it off just for fun. I'm doing this again away from me, so. And it's your standard internals, but not bad, not bad, not bad. I'm not going to complain about it. Snaps back into place pretty well. The gap, usually the weak spots on these things are this little gap in here. This is how you can tell a good reel from a bad reel. If that gap is getting bigger and smaller as you turn the reel, um, that's a sign that it's not been manufactured real well. Or if there's a big gap there, because sometimes your line will catch in there. But that's pretty nice right there. It's not changing at all, which is great. So what's my final conclusion? The Orvis versus this one. Well, definitely I'm sticking with my Orvis rod. Um, uh, it's much lighter. It's much newer technology. Again, this is a rod from around 2000, I would say. It's kind of design wise. Um, but other than that, it's got nine or 10 guides on it. Um, and they're spaced essentially pretty close to what my Orvis rod is, and um, not a bad value. Probably not the rod I would get as for a first timer, but if you've been fishing a little while and you want to have a second rod in case your rod breaks or just leave it in the car or something like that, definitely do that. So for under 50 bucks, rod, reel, and line. Not a bad deal. Not a bad deal. All this stuff comes from China. Most of this rod you get anyway. And I think I've explained this before, but for instance, the line, let's say this was a $10 line, okay? So then it goes from the factory to the distributor in China. So immediately it goes from $10 to $20. There's a markup in retail where you just double it every time. So then it goes to sort of the buyer, the U.S. warehouse buyer, so and gets shipped across to here. So it goes from $20 to $40. Then from there, the retailer then ships it to the retail stores, and they sell it to the retail stores for, let's say, the $40, and then they have to double it when they sell it to you. So now it's $80. So, uh, probably this line would be at least a 50, 60, $70 line by the time it gets to you, from the factory. So that's probably the same with the rod and stuff too. So, there's a certain amount of markup there, and if you can get past the markup, that's good. On the other hand, I always try to buy most of my stuff from fly shops if I can. Uh, but when I'm buying bulk, when I'm buying 10 rods or 20 rods, I have to do it in a sort of more economical way. And I buy stuff in huge bulk like that because we run these schools and things. So, and I give a lot of these away. This one will probably go to some kid at some point uh, through my lawn trout, the money I make through lawn trout. So that's it. That's my Temu rod. I'm shockingly happy with it. Is that a good term? Shockingly happy? Okay. So we'll see ya. I hope this was helpful. Um, it's it's a Sugeling reel too. I didn't realize that at the time. So it's a Sugeling reel and a Sugeling rod. Okay. Or whatever. That's how I'm pronouncing it. Sougay, Sujay E Lang, Sujay E Lang. Okay, so there you go. See ya.